It's been a while since I've done one of these. Let's get into it. What's up, ladies and gentlemen? It's Daniel here from the GeekSpeakNation channel, and after a very long time, I can't remember the last time it was, but I'm here to bring you a movie review, and it is on the new Netflix film Extraction, starring Chris Hemsworth and is directed by Sam Hargrave. And I'm not gonna lie, sometimes I have to do a double take when I keep on saying that guy's last name because it's very similar to mine. But with that being said, this is a film about this mercenary who gets hired on this job to re-kidnap, but to bring back a kid who was kidnapped by some rival drug lord. The premise is very simple, and also it is written by Joe Russo, one half of the Russo brothers of Avengers fame. And I'm not gonna lie, this was a fun movie. This was a really, really well done film. I think the biggest standout that you have to mention straight off the bat is definitely Sam Hargrave, the director of the film. And also he stars in a very small role in the film. But yeah, this guy, I think he has some incredible potential as a filmmaker moving forward in the industry. Originally he started off as a stuntman and a stunt double, and then eventually worked his way up, and he's going along the lines of something like a David Leitch and Chad Stahelski, who they went and made the first John Wick, and then they separated to make John Wick 2, and then Deadpool 2, and then Atomic Blonde as well. So they took their repertoire and their knowledge of working in the stunt world in order to make engaging action films, and that's exactly what's being done here. And I think his direction style is very visceral, and it's almost kind of this like almost Paul Greengrass-esque kind of shaky cam to it, but everything is still very clear, and for the most part it's not necessarily very wide, but it is very focused, and you're able to tell what's going on in frame, which I really, really do appreciate when it comes to action. And I think that aspect of it is handled very, very well. I think the only thing I need to see more improvement on is more so how he handles making conversations more so engaging without the threat of violence. I mean, because of course, you know, things can be very intense if the acting is very well done, and people are staring down one another and making threats and blah, 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 blah. And then of course, you know, the scene is gonna be, you know, very intense in that regard. But I feel like if it wants to have more impact, I need to feel more of an emotional through line beyond just the acting, and also in his camera work and the way that he frames a lot of conversations that aren't, like I said, you know, shrouded by a threat of, you know, violence. And then on top of that, I'd definitely like to see from him a little bit more, I would probably say, a little bit more ingenuity with the camera angles, and for them to have a bit more purpose in what they're trying to say story-wise. There's a lot of shots in the film where you're like, okay, this conveys sadness, alone, emptiness, yada yada yada, feeling of being trapped in a very big world. You know, very simple concept, but I was looking for something just a little bit more visually out of the box, and maybe that was more so constrained time, because the settings that he has to work with are very, very interesting. So I feel like there's a lot more he probably could have done just visually to convey more thematic elements through his camera work. But besides that, as a directorial debut, I'd say Sam Hargrave did a fantastic job, and I look forward to him making more films in the future. So overall, in him capturing the essence of the story and telling the story, does a fantastic job. And when it comes down to the action and the acting and the choreography, that is all stellar as well. Chris Hemsworth does a great job, and so does his stunt doubles as well. And all the other actors involved really give it like 110% when it comes to the action. It's really, really engaging. The choreography is clear, which I enjoy. And yeah, everything's pretty believable and pretty straightforward, which is really enjoyable. I'd say the only other big thing to talk about when it comes to this film is kind of the story, because the story is good and at moments almost great, but at the same time it feels a little bit lacking because it leans on very heavily into cliches. Joe Russo, you know, when you talk about the Russo brothers and you talk about their first, you know, some of their biggest work coming from Community at first, And Community being, you know, very satirical in a lot of ways, and being able to take those tropes that you know and flip them on their head, taking that element of their writing and then bringing it over to action to the Captain America films, it works because Joe Russo is very aware. He's very aware of all of your Hollywood tropes that you end up seeing inside of a movie, and kind of uses that to play on your expectations of where you think not only is the story going to go, but also the characters as well. Because I mean, everything from the framing device that's used to tell the story of, you start with what seemingly might be your hero in their last moments, drawing their last breath, and that's how the movie opens, and then, you know, it cuts back all the way to the beginning of the story. That is a framing device. You have it as the, you know, our protagonist is this cold assassin, killer, yada yada yada, who seemingly has lost a loved one in his past, and is this person that he has to protect is obviously bringing up those emotions that he has to face. So there's a lot of those same, you know, stereotypical tropes that come on this stuff, whether it's, you know, dealing with Taken, Man on Fire, all this sort of stuff, John Wick, you know, the inspirations are clear. But the interesting thing that I do like is that the way that they play with it is that this film is very emotionally charged. I think Chris Hemsworth's character of Tyler is much more emotionally available than you see in a lot of action heroes, and I really did appreciate that, because, you know, most of the time they're very stoic and they won't. You try to pry, they'd be like, but who did you lose? You'd be like, shut up, I don't want to talk about it. And that's really like kind of the end of the discussion for when it comes to getting to know the character, until like a big event happens, they almost lose the person they're trying to protect, or they get gravely injured and they're all loosey-goosey and they're like, I think it's about time to open up because I'm on death's door. But like generally, like it's pretty early on in the film, like Chris Hemsworth's character opens up about his past and what he's been through and his trauma and his regrets, and he has tears streaming down his face, and I was like, okay, this is different. I like this. And they do a lot to try to humanize a lot of other characters and show that like this cycle of violence that's going on and how it breeds more violence and all this sort of stuff. And I was like, wow, I think this is the more interesting thing that's going on here, is the through line of the emotion that charges the whole entire story. I think that's really what brings it all together and makes it feel very unique, especially when you have the second act slump, as I like to call it, for escort movies. Whenever you have a movie where a character has to escort someone to something, you always get the second act slump, where first act you're setting up pretty quickly of who the characters are, and then boom, right into these crazy action set pieces, yada 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 yada, and then it slows down incredibly because they find themselves seeking refuge somewhere for a night or something like that before the final act starts. The second act slump is there, but the slump part is pretty short, even though the second act is pretty long in the tooth, and they ended up using that to humanize a lot of the characters and making the third act much more impactful than it normally would have been if you're just watching any other regular action movie. So overall, Joe Russo does an interesting job with the script, where it's not necessarily overly dependent on tropes, and it does subvert your expectations and play with them by having them be very emotionally charged and humanizing. But I think it leans a little too much on them, and especially by the end of the story, and like you have like, you know, the last 2 minutes of the film, and it's like montage wrap up and all that sort of stuff, and they start throwing like every cliche action movie like cliche wrap up at you. That was like my only gripe. I think it could have leaned a little bit less and tried to be a little bit more unique in where the story was going and the consequences that were going to end up happening, because from the moment the film began, I was like, okay, I can pretty much piece together all that's going to happen based off of every single other character who ends up getting introduced. I'm like, okay, you're going to die, you're going to help, you're blah, 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 blah. Like, it was pretty easy to piece all the pieces together. But I think, like I said, what makes it entertaining is the way that Joe knows that you're gonna piece it together, but he still tries to find a way to make you care. And I think that, you know, that's the number one thing. But I definitely like to see him do something a little bit more original with the journey and try to make the second act like slump suck a little less. Whether you're watching Captain America 2 or 3, or you're watching this film, they do have that second act slump where you're like, all right, let's let's pep it up a little bit. You started off strong, obviously, because you wanted to hook us in. I think you should focus more on that. But that's more so all I have to say about the story. Besides that, it still does get the job done. It's still very enjoyable. The only other gripe I'd probably say that I have with this film is that towards the end of the movie, it starts getting a little bit bombastic with the grenade usage, where apparently everyone just had like 18 grenades on them at all times, and then they just started chucking them. And my only gripe with that is that you can tell this movie did not have the biggest budget in the world, and like their locations were very limited that they can shoot at. And their VFX budget was very, very small, because that smoke, the smoke effects and the fire bloom effects did not look that great. There were some explosions where I was like, I don't know, man. I don't know if you needed an explosion there. I don't know. I don't know if you had the budget to do an explosion there. I think you would have been better just doing like a couple of headshots, or like, you know, finding some interesting way for them to clear out this room without them just, you know, throwing a grenade and it's like, oh, bad CGI fireball. I could have done without that in certain cases. So I think that was kind of a misstep, I think, in certain action sequences where it just becomes too reliant on, let's cause an explosion, easy money, boom, and that's about it. But with that being said, overall, I really enjoyed this movie. Sam Hargrave did an excellent job as a director for his first time as a directorial debut. I'm looking forward more to what he can do. Joe Russo, I'm looking more forward to his writing and seeing what he can do, and I think he can definitely step up his game even more and deliver something that's even more emotionally impactful and emotionally resonant than this film already is, and have it be even more charged and still deliver a story that's captivating, keeps you on the edge of your seat. And then lastly, I do want to say Chris Hemsworth did an excellent job in this film. He's a very charismatic leading man and is very good when it comes to action sequences. And I'd say probably like, I don't know, it feels like out of everyone at Marvel, it's like him and Scarlett Johansson are they're just actors like you can really genuinely see them, people gravitating towards them in other movies as compared to a lot of like MCU actors. A lot of other MCU actors, it feels like it's been harder for them to find really good roles outside of the Avengers, outside of the MCU. I don't know if it's because working with the MCU has caused conflicts of schedule and all that sort of stuff, or it's like people just don't want to give them projects because they think they're very one-dimensional, think that all they could do is superhero films. But it's nice to see these actors being able to branch out and flex, like, hey, I'm more than just the dude that wields the hammer and all that sort of stuff. So that's really nice to see. But with that being said, guys, this movie gets a recommendation from me. If you like solid action films like John Wick and all that sort of stuff, this is a very entertaining time, and it's a pretty great way to spend an evening, and I'd recommend the film. With that being said, guys, I'm Daniel. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this review, go ahead and down there and hit that like button. And if you're new here, subscribe to become a part of the GeekSpeakNation channel, and make sure you hit that bell notification right next to it and hit all to make sure you actually get notifications of when I post a video, because hey, it takes a lot to resurrect a dead channel, but hey, what can we do? We're gonna give it a shot. With that being said, guys, like I said, I am Daniel. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to get geeky.